My obsession with the dark web, it all started during my second year of university, in a cybersecurity class. The professor mentioned this hidden corner of the internet, and it sounded almost mythical, like a digital Atlantis, a place very few people truly understood. I devoured everything I could find, articles, videos, you name it. Some were sensationalized, others were highly technical, but I was captivated by this idea of a vast, hidden network humming just beneath the surface of the internet we use every day. And to be clear, my curiosity wasn't about the dark side. Not at first. I just wanted to understand the technology. The architecture. How could something so massive stay so well hidden? What was its real purpose? Getting in was surprisingly straightforward. I downloaded the Tor browser, a tool designed to anonymize your traffic by bouncing it all over the world. Just to be safe, I used a VPN on top of that. But navigating this new world, that was a different story. This wasn't Google. There was no search bar to guide you. You had to use specialized directories. A place called the Hidden Wiki was the main entry point. So to learn the ropes, I joined a few forums, and for a long time, I just lurked, quietly observing the people who had been in this space for years. Only when I felt ready did I start exploring on my own. And at first, what I found was surprisingly harmless, sometimes even wholesome. At worst, it was only mildly unsettling. I found countless resources on online privacy, guides on encrypted messaging, secure email, how to avoid surveillance. And this wasn't just for criminals. A huge part of the user base seemed to be journalists and activists from countries with oppressive regimes, something I'd never even considered. It was a powerful reminder that this technology, it could be a tool for freedom. A lot of users were just normal people who really valued their privacy. But for every person trying to protect their freedom, I found others who were trapped in a prison of their own making. For example, I stumbled across a small but deeply unsettling community of users who believed they were victims of something called gangstalking. Gangstalking is this belief that you're being systematically harassed by a coordinated group of people. The victims would describe constant surveillance, public intimidation, all orchestrated by strangers, or even the authorities. Now, while some isolated cases of organized harassment have been documented, most of these claims, they completely lack evidence. These beliefs are often symptoms of serious psychiatric conditions, like paranoia, and what I witnessed on those forums was heartbreaking and deeply disturbing. You had people whose lives had completely fallen apart, but instead of getting help, they found each other in these secretive online groups and actively fed each other's delusions. It was like watching a tragedy unfold in slow motions. For me, exploring the dark web started as an academic project, but it quickly became something much deeper. It forced me to think about privacy, surveillance, and freedom in a whole new way. The dark web, I realized, it isn't inherently good or bad. It's just a tool. And its true nature is defined only by the people who use it. The more time I spent exploring, the more I started stumbling into the web's darker side. It was a gradual descent, like peeling back the layers of something you're not entirely sure you want to see. I'd find mentions of marketplaces where illegal goods were being traded, forums where people discussed things that were obviously unethical or just straight up criminal. I wasn't looking for this stuff. It was just there, scattered in between the harmless content. It felt like walking through a busy street market and catching these little glimpses down a shadowy back alley where you just know something illicit is going down. But then, I started hearing rumors of the so-called red rooms.
Yeah.
And that was my first step into the deepest, darkest parts of the web. They were supposedly live-streamed events, unspeakable acts, performed on camera for a paying audience. The idea itself was chilling. Some people claimed they were just urban legends, stories made up to add to the dark web's mystique. But others spoke about them with eerie, specific details, describing how you'd have to find hidden links, pay a steep price, just to get in. I hadn't seen anything to prove they were real, but the very idea of it was deeply unsettling. What really struck me, Beak, though, was the casualness of it all. How people in these corners of the web would discuss the most abhorrent things, as if they were talking about the weather. It was like stepping into a world where all the rules of society had just been stripped away. Anonymity had created a space where anything, no matter how horrifying, could be discussed. Human decency felt like a forgotten language, replaced by this morbid fascination with the forbidden. And through all this creeping darkness, I kept reminding myself of my original purpose. Understand, don't engage. I was careful. I avoided clicking on anything that looked suspicious. I stayed out of places I knew I didn't belong. But still, you could feel the weight of it. For every activist forum, there was an equally sinister counterpart lurking in the shadows. A constant reminder that this tool, in the wrong hands, could be a conduit for pure evil. Those rumors about the red rooms, they just lingered in the back of my mind, whispered about in forums, always elusive, never confirmed. At first, I dismissed them. Digital urban legends, born from overactive imaginations. But the more I read, the more I realized they might not be myths at all. It felt like an unsettling puzzle, one I wasn't even sure I wanted to solve. But the curiosity, it was just too strong to ignore. I had to know the truth. My search for the truth about red rooms, it started in the forums, places where users claimed to have insider knowledge. The posts were cryptic, filled with vague hints and coded language. Some people swore they were real. Pay-to-view live streams where horrific acts were performed on camera, often at the audience's request. But just as many people dismissed the whole idea as technically impossible, pointing out how difficult it is to stream live video anonymously through Tor. And yet, there were just enough detailed accounts to keep me hooked, enough to make me wonder if some twisted corner of the internet had actually found a way to make this nightmare a reality. The more I read, the more I felt like an archaeologist, sifting through digital ruins for a horrifying artifact that might not even exist. So, I followed the leads. Cautiously, I moved through layers of forums, chat rooms, and directories. And the deeper I went, the more the atmosphere began to change. These digital spaces, they felt heavier, darker. I started finding sites with names that sounded like warnings. Simple, black and white pages, filled with nothing but ominous-looking links. Some of them required a password or a crypto payment just to see what was behind the door. And I hesitated. Every single instinct I had was screaming at me to stop, to turn back. I didn't want to cross a line that I could never uncross. When the countdown hit 0, the screen flickered, and a grainy video feed appeared. The room was stark, clinical, lit by a single, harsh fluorescent light that cast sharp shadows everywhere. In the center, A man in a lab coat stood over what looked like cobbled together equipment, medical monitors, steel tables, and tools I didn't even want to imagine the purpose of. Then the camera panned, revealing a figure strapped to one of the tables. They were conscious, their face twisted with a level of fear I can't even describe. You could hear muffled cries, even through the gag. This wasn't a movie set. It wasn't a performance. The terror. It was real. You could feel it, right through the screen. Beside the video, a chat panel exploded with messages. Anonymous viewers urging the host on, asking for specific experiments. And that was almost more horrifying than the video itself. The casualness of it all. They treated this person like a spectacle, something to be ordered off a menu, as if the human being on that table wasn't human at all. The experiments began, and I could barely watch. The host used injections, electrical currents, things designed to test pain thresholds. The victim writhed and screamed, and the audience, they cheered, their requests getting more and more depraved. It was a descent into pure, unfiltered cruelty, all pretending to be some kind of sick science. I don't know how long I watched. Seconds, minutes. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I forced myself to close the browser and slammed my laptop shut. I just sat there, in the silence of my room, feeling sick to my stomach. My hands were shaking, and this wave of guilt just washed over me. Guilt for ever looking in the first place. The reality was so much worse than any urban legend. This wasn't a myth. It was real, and it was happening. Right then, somewhere hidden in the dark. That night, I deleted everything. The Tor browser, the crypto wallet, every log I had kept. I wanted no trace left, no connection to that sickening world I had just seen. But you can't delete a memory. The images, they stayed with me. They're burned into my mind, and that's a burden I guess I'll have to carry alone. Red rooms may be rare, they may be elusive, but their existence, it proves something terrifying. That the darkest corners of the human mind can find a home online, in the safety of anonymity. It's a chilling reflection of what people are truly capable of when they think no one is watching. Dyersburg, Tennessee. It's the kind of picturesque town where the days just seem to drift by, lazy as the nearby Mississippi River. A town where life moves with the seasons, where your neighbors know you by name, and a friendly nod is just how people say hello. But in 2011, this quiet calm was shattered. Shattered by a mystery that would consume the entire community and make national headlines. The disappearance of Karen Swift, a vibrant, 44-year-old mother of 4. What started as just another ordinary Saturday, a day of yard sales and casual errands, ended in a chilling, empty void, leaving behind a puzzle that, to this day, remains hauntingly unsolved. On Saturday, October 29th, 2011, Karen was busy with a yard sale at her home. Now, for anyone in Dyersburg, a yard sale isn't just about selling old things. It's a social event, a chance to chat and catch up. And Karen, known for her bubbly, outgoing personality, was right in her element. She greeted everyone with a cheerful smile, her home buzzing with activity. She was a fixture in the community, active in local fitness groups, and a devoted mother who seemed to juggle a busy life with grace. But beneath the surface of this vibrant woman, life was complicated. She and her husband, David Swift, were in the middle of a contentious divorce. And despite this, they were still living in the same house, a strained arrangement they kept up for the sake of their children. The yard sale was, in a way, a symbol of Karen's desire for a new chapter, a chance to clear out the old to make way for the new. Little did anyone know, it would be one of the last normal moments of her life. And later that evening, after the yard sale crowd was long gone, Karen went to a Halloween party with some friends. She returned home late and, according to reports, had a brief conversation with David. The details are sparse, but the air between them was apparently cordial, if not a little strained. Then, sometime in the early hours of Halloween morning, a night meant for harmless fun and costumes, Karen vanished, without a trace. When she couldn't be reached the next day, a deep, gnawing panic began to set in among her friends and family. Alarm bells were ringing, and soon the search was on. The first clue to her disappearance was the discovery of her car, a white 2004 Nissan Murano. It was found abandoned on a rural road, just a few miles from her home, in a scene that looked and felt eerily staged. Both of the vehicle's tires were flat, as if it had been forced to a stop. Her purse and her cell phone were still inside, a detail that was immediately suspicious. A woman like Karen wouldn't just walk away from her car, especially not without her phone. The discovery only deepened the fear and the confusion. So, was she abducted by a stranger who saw her at the yard sale? Was this a calculated act by someone she knew, someone she trusted? Or was it the tragic end of a marital dispute that had finally boiled over? Dyer County authorities, along with a legion of volunteers, launched a massive search. They combed through dense woods, trudged through fields, and scoured the waterways, their hope dimming with each passing day. The community, once a bastion of small-town comfort, was now a place of whispered fears and swirling speculation. Every missing person poster, every search party, seemed to underscore the unbearable truth. Karen Swift was gone, and no one knew why. The quiet town of Dyersburg was now at the heart of a chilling mystery, one that would soon take a devastating turn. The grim search for Karen Swift came to a devastating end on December 10th, 2011. After weeks of tireless searching, with an entire community holding its collective breath, her body was discovered. She was found in a wooded area near a cemetery, and the location, it was chosen with a chilling deliberation. Her remains had been carefully concealed under a pile of brush, less than 3 miles from her own home. The discovery confirmed everyone's worst fears. Karen hadn't just disappeared. She had been murdered. The autopsy would soon reveal the cause of death: blunt force trauma to the head. The news sent a fresh wave of shock and grief through Dyersburg. The search for a missing person was over. Now, it was a hunt for a killer. As investigators began to sift through the evidence, the case only grew more complex. And right at the center of that storm was David Swift, Karen's estranged husband. Suspicion fell on him almost immediately. The couple's contentious divorce proceedings, well, that provided a clear motive. Friends of Karen came forward, claiming she'd expressed fear of David in the weeks before she vanished. Whispers of past domestic disputes started to circulate, adding fuel to the fire. But despite the allegations, despite the cloud of suspicion hanging over him, David Swift was never charged. He cooperated with law enforcement, maintained his innocence. But for many in Dyersburg, the doubt remained, lingering like a thick Tennessee fog. But the investigation wasn't just focused on David. Other theories began to emerge, each more unsettling than the last. Could it have been a stranger who abducted her after her car broke down? An opportunistic predator on a deserted road? Maybe, but there was no evidence. Then there was the yard sale. Investigators considered a chilling possibility that someone who attended the sale came back later to harm her. But just like every other theory, it led nowhere. The truth is, Karen's life was a complex web of relationships. She was active in so many circles, knew so many people, that her killer could have been anyone. A friend, an ex-lover, a casual acquaintance hiding a dark secret. And that was the case's greatest hurdle. There was no clear suspect, no obvious motive, no smoking gun, no eyewitness, no confession. The murder of Karen Swift wasn't a crime of passion. It was a meticulous, calculated act, designed to leave no trace of the person responsible. It became a case built on whispers and suspicion, a case defined by unanswered questions, a haunting testament to how quickly a life can be snuffed out, leaving a family and an entire community to grapple with the agonizing silence that follows. Months turned into years, and the investigation into Karen Swift's murder stalled. The once bustling case file was left to gather dust on a shelf. Despite relentless efforts from law enforcement, despite private investigators hired by the family, nothing. No arrests were ever made. No new evidence ever came to light. That initial flood of leads and theories had slowed to a frustrating trickle, and then to nothing at all. With no witnesses, and with only sparse forensic evidence from her car and the burial site, investigators were at a complete standstill. It was a maddening puzzle, with far too many missing pieces. The community of Dyersburg remained haunted. It was a chilling scar on the town that simply refused to heal. For Karen's 4 children, moving forward without their mother was a monumental task, made nearly impossible by that one gnawing question: who had taken her from them? Her friends refused to let her memory fade. They organized memorials, held candlelight vigils. They did everything they could to keep her case in the public eye, always hoping that a new witness, or even just a pang of conscience, might finally bring someone forward. And so, more than a decade later, the same key question still cast a long, dark shadow over this case. Who killed Karen Swift, and why? Was it someone she knew, a figure from her troubled marriage, or was it a random attacker? A monster who seized a terrifying opportunity. And what about the flat tires on her car? Were they staged to force her to stop? Or was it just a coincidence that a killer took advantage of? And finally, there's the lingering suspicion around her husband, David. Never charged with a crime, but forever debated by those who followed the case. Karen Swift's murder isn't just a cold case. It's one of the most perplexing and tragic mysteries in Tennessee's recent history. Her family continues to search for answers, clinging to the fragile hope that one day, new evidence will surface. Or that someone, somewhere, who knows what happened, will finally break their silence. Until then, her story serves as a chilling reminder of how quickly a life can be stolen, and of the enduring pain left behind by unanswered questions. For the people of Dyersburg, the loss of Karen Swift is a wound that is never fully closed, and her vibrant spirit is remembered, even as the search for her killer goes on. It was just a typical Saturday morning. You know, errands, a long list of things to do. But then I saw it. A simple, handwritten sign, yard sale today. I drove right past it at first, but then, almost like some invisible force was pulling me back, I found myself pulling over. The sale was set up in the front yard of this small, weathered house. Nothing special, just your average neighborhood yard sale. But as I was walking up, I noticed something. Tucked away near the back of a table, an old, unlabeled cardboard box. It was covered in dust, looked like it hadn't been moved in years. I crouched down and picked it up. It wasn't heavy, but it felt strangely solid. The lid was taped shut, the edges frayed. I asked the guy running the sale what was inside. He just shrugged. "Just a box of old stuff," he said. "Feel free to take a look." So, I carefully peeled back the old tape and lifted the lid. Inside was a strange mix of things. A few old hairbands, a couple of rusted keys, a small hairbrush, some photographs. But the one thing that really stood out were the newspaper clippings. They were all yellowed with age, crinkled at the edges. I picked one up, and when I read the headline, a chill went right down my spine. Missing person, Jane Doe. There were several clippings, all about the same case. A woman whose body had been found decades ago in a nearby town. I flipped through the articles. Her body was discovered in the early 90s, and because she was never identified, her murder went unsolved. The articles described her as a young brunette, last seen at a local diner. But then, as I sifted through the clippings, I found something far more disturbing. There were photographs tucked in among them, grainy, black and white photos of a woman who matched Jane Doe's description. But these weren't newspaper photos. They looked like they were taken in secret. Her, walking alone in a parking lot, entering a store, just sitting on a bench by herself. And it wasn't just clippings and photos. There were her personal items in the box. The hairbrush I'd seen earlier, a few pieces of jewelry, even some clothing. They were old, worn, and had this heavy, musty smell. All this time, the seller was just standing there, behind the table, not really looking at me, not saying a word. I glanced up at him, wondering if he had any idea what was in this box. But he was just silent, indifferent. It was as if he was just waiting for me to leave so he could go back inside his house. I asked him if he knew who the woman was. He looked at the box and just sort of shrugged. Said he found it in the attic, never opened it, had no idea what was inside. But his answer, it just didn't sit right with me. How could you not care what was in this box? This wasn't just old stuff. This was someone's life, connected to an unsolved murder. I wanted to push him for more, but there was something in his eyes, cold, distant. It made me uneasy. It was like he was hiding a secret, or just didn't want to be involved at all. So, I turned my attention back to the box. I started reading the clippings again, more carefully this time, and that's when I saw it. Mention of a man, Jane's boyfriend at the time she went missing. A local guy, apparently. But no one had seen him since the day she disappeared. His name was in the articles, but there were no photos of him. And as I stood there, piecing it all together, I couldn't help but look at the seller again. Could he know more than he was letting on? Could he be connected to this case? Could he have been involved? Or was he telling the truth? That he just found a box in his attic? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something huge. The clippings were a dead end, for now. There was only one thing to do. I had to take the box. I paid the man a few dollars, walked back to my car, and drove home. When I got home, I laid everything out on the kitchen table. This jumbled mess of history. I tried to make sense of it all, but it was like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. The whole thing was just deeply unsettling. Every clipping seemed to raise more questions than it answered. It was a chaotic mix of old newspaper ink and faded memories, and I felt like a detective, standing at the very beginning of a decades-old cold case. When my husband eventually arrived home, I showed him what I'd found. At first, he just looked at me like I was completely crazy. But after he read through a few of the clippings, after he saw the hairbrush and the jewelry, his expression changed. He looked at me, his voice low, and he said, "Whoever took these photos, they knew who she was. So, why didn't they come forward when her body was found?" He was trying to find a logical explanation, but even he couldn't deny the connection. He said that, logically, the photos and the clippings might not be related, that someone could have just thrown a bunch of random junk in a box. But I knew that wasn't it. No, this was too much of a coincidence. If there were old lottery tickets and a sewing kit in there, then yeah, maybe. But everything in this box was too personal, too deliberate. It almost felt like a trophy, a grim, twisted memento of a life that was taken. My husband didn't want to believe it. He told me I was overreacting, just getting lost in my own head. I told him I was convinced this wasn't just some random woman in a photo. This was the murdered woman. This was Jane Doe. He didn't say when it finally clicked for him, but I know the exact moment. As I reached for the box again, he stopped me. His voice was sharp. "Don't touch it." And that's when I knew. He believed me, too. He didn't want me touching it anymore because he suddenly realized it might actually be forensic evidence, something that, in all my excitement, I hadn't even considered. The next morning, we called the police, and it was the strangest phone call I've ever had to make. How do you even begin to explain that? That you think you found evidence in a 30-year-old cold case at a yard sale? We tried to sound as calm and rational as possible. And to our relief, the officer on the other end actually took us seriously. A few hours later, 2 detectives were at our door. They took the box, handling it with this quiet reverence that confirmed everything we were thinking. You could see it on their faces as they looked through the clippings, the photos, the personal items. Their expressions just grew more and more somber. They asked a few questions about the seller, the location, and then they left. As far as I know, their next stop was to have a talk with the man who ran the sale. A while later, I called one of the officers. "The box and everything in it," he told me, "has been entered into Jane Doe's evidence file." His voice was professional, but I could hear something else in it, a quiet acknowledgement of how big this was. "We're following up on some of the leads you brought to our attention. This is a significant development in a case that has been cold for decades, and that was the one good thing to come out of all of this. That somehow I had actually helped." The feeling was this strange mix of relief and just deep solemnity. It wasn't some heroic act. It was just a small thing, born from a moment of curiosity, but it carried the weight of a life that was lost. I had found a forgotten piece of someone's story, and in a small way, had given a voice back to Jane Doe. It felt like closing a loop that had been left open for 30 years. I didn't get a medal. There was no thank you in the newspaper, but knowing that I had helped put a forgotten piece of a puzzle back on the board, for me, that was more than enough. In 2018, the sprawling, quiet neighborhoods of Fort Worth, Texas, were the last place you'd expect a nightmare to unfold. The city is steeped in its cowtown heritage, known for friendly, down-to-earth people. And it has this cherished tradition, the weekend garage sale. And these weren't just about offloading old junk. They were a community ritual, a chance for neighbors to clear out their attics, for families to make a little extra cash, and for strangers to connect over the thrill of a hidden treasure. It was a safe, familiar scene, a slice of Americana where trust was just an unspoken rule. But in the spring of that year, that idyllic picture was shattered, because a new kind of terror was lurking among the lawn chairs and dusty toys. A predator who saw these sales not as a place for a bargain, but as a hunting ground, a chance to prey on the vulnerable and shatter the peace. The first tremor of fear struck in March. A woman was hosting a sale. A man lingered for a while, his presence unsettling. His questions about some furniture, they felt forced. She had the eerie feeling he wasn't sizing up her items. He was sizing up her home. Later that evening, as she was packing everything away, he returned. And this time, the harmless facade was gone. He was armed. He forced his way inside, demanding cash and valuables. Though she was physically unharmed, the sanctity of her home was violated. The police filed it away as a one-off robbery. But it wasn't, because it wasn't an isolated event. Within weeks, a terrifying pattern began to emerge. There was a monster operating in plain sight. He targeted women who were hosting sales alone, or with minimal help. He was a creature of timing, always striking near the end of the day, when the crowds were gone and his victims were isolated. And the descriptions were always the same. He was unremarkable, middle-aged, average build, a face that would just disappear into a crowd. The fear was palpable, because this wasn't just about losing money. It was a violation of something much deeper. It was a betrayal of a fundamental American tradition. By early summer, the media caught wind of the crimes. Headlines screamed warnings, turning the entire community on its head. And soon, the criminal had a name that would strike fear into the hearts of residents. They called him the Texas garage sale stalker. The name was perfect. It captured the chilling nature of his crimes, and it turned a harmless weekend activity into a potential trap. Community forums, social media, they exploded. Homeowners shared their own strange encounters, tips on how to stay safe. A sense of collective vulnerability spread like wildfire. People started taking precautions, doing sales in groups, and making it a strict rule to never, ever let a stranger inside their home. That old idea of trusting a friendly face, it was gone, replaced by a deep, gnawing suspicion. But despite the precautions, despite the awareness, the stalker kept striking. His ability to evade capture was uncanny, like a silent ghost moving through suburban streets. He just seemed to know how to avoid security cameras. His nondescript appearance was his greatest weapon, making it almost impossible for witnesses to give a usable description. The police pleaded with the public to report anything suspicious. But how do you report a man who looks like everyone else? The investigation hit one dead end after another. The sense of helplessness was overwhelming. A feeling that no matter what they did, the stalker was always one step ahead. And then, in July, a breakthrough. A glimmer of hope. A woman hosting a sale noticed him. A man loitering near her driveway. He fit the description perfectly. A cold dread settled in her stomach. But instead of confronting him, she quietly alerted a neighbor across the street. And that neighbor was a hero. She grabbed her phone and started taking pictures of the man from a distance. The stalker must have sensed he was being watched, because he left abruptly. His plan thwarted. The neighbors immediately sent the photos to the police. The images were grainy, not good enough for an ID, but it didn't matter. This was a turning point. For the first time, the community had fought back, and they had won. This was no longer just a police investigation. It was a community-wide manhunt. The stalker's reign of terror reached its chilling crescendo in late August. A woman, hosting a sale on the far edge of Fort Worth, thinking she was out of harm's way, became his final and most brutal victim. The man struck with a viciousness he hadn't shown before. The encounter escalated quickly. He struck her with the butt of his gun, leaving her unconscious before fleeing. A neighbor heard the commotion, and in a moment that may have saved her life, called 911. The brutality of this attack was a horrifying turning point. The urgency of the investigation hit a fever pitch. Police set up decoy sales with undercover officers, hoping to lure him into a trap. The community's vigilance reached a new level. Many residents just canceled their sales altogether. The breakthrough, the moment everyone had been waiting for, finally came in September. The stalker, growing careless, perhaps overconfident, attempted to rob a garage sale in a neighborhood that had formed an organized community watch group. This wasn't just neighbors looking out for each other anymore. This was a coordinated system, with members observing from nearby cars, phones in hand, ready to act. When the man approached the homeowner with his usual aggressive demeanor, the group sprang into action. They surrounded his vehicle, blocked his escape route, while another member, with a clear head, called the police. The man tried to run, a moment of sheer panic, but he was quickly apprehended, cornered, and captured by the community members themselves, before the police even arrived. His capture brought a collective, instant gasp of relief across the city. He was identified as Mark Eldridge, a 43-year-old drifter with a rap sheet. That's why he was a ghost. No fixed address, no one to connect his movements. In his vehicle, police found a trove of stolen items, linking him definitively to the robberies. The Texas garage sale stalker was no longer an anonymous ghost. He was a man in custody, and the terror he had inflicted on Fort Worth was finally, mercifully, over. The arrest of Mark Eldridge brought a wave of relief across Fort Worth. But the scars he left behind, they were deep, lasting. That once innocent weekend ritual was forever tainted. For the victims, the trauma was immense. They struggled with anxiety, with fear, a shadow that now hung over their daily lives. The community's sense of trust, the very foundation of its identity, was shattered. What was once a symbol of neighborly connection had become a stark reminder of vulnerability. During his trial, Mark Eldridge showed zero remorse. His demeanor was cold, unfeeling. Prosecutors described him not as a simple thief, but as a calculated predator who had exploited the very idea of community for his own twisted gain. The legal system, however, was swift. He was convicted on multiple counts: robbery, assault, burglary, and the sentence provided a small measure of justice. 25 years in prison, a sentence that ensured he could never prey on anyone again. In the end, the case served as a chilling reminder that danger can lurk in the most innocent of places. But it also proved the vital importance of community vigilance. The people of Fort Worth took that lesson to heart. They didn't just move on, they adapted. New safety measures became permanent. Hosting sales in groups, a show of strength in numbers, using security cameras, and most importantly, keeping an open line of communication with their neighbors. The ordeal was horrific, but it forged an unbreakable bond. Neighbors who had been strangers banded together. They built a network of support, ensuring that no one would ever have to face a threat like that alone again. The city had been tested by fear, but in the end, it was made stronger by unity. It was one of those late summer mornings, humid, hazy, the kind where the air just hangs heavy and still. I was on my way to a yard sale a few blocks from my house. I've always been drawn to them. You know, the thrill of the hunt. You never know what stories are waiting inside the things people are finally ready to let go of. As I walked up, I could see a crowd already picking through the tables. I was drawn to this faded green lawn chair. It looked exactly like the one my grandma used to have. It was a comfortable memory. But as I was looking at it, a different sound pulled my attention away. Raised voices. It was coming from a woman by a table filled with kitchenware. Her body language was tense as she gestured at a set of delicate china plates. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had an edge. Across from her, an older man, maybe in his late 60s, stood his ground, his face set in this stubborn expression. They were locked in a quiet, but clearly heated, disagreement. At first, I didn't think much of it. Yard sales can get surprisingly emotional, but there was something about the silent intensity of this argument that felt different, more serious than just a squabble over a few dollars. You could feel the tension building. Then the woman's voice rose. Her words were sharp, accusatory. The older man finally started firing back, his own voice rising in frustration. They began talking over each other, a rapid-fire exchange of words I couldn't quite make out. But the anger, that was unmistakable. And just like that, the whole yard sale went quiet. People stopped browsing. They set down books, picture frames, whatever they were holding. Every single head turned to watch. The host of the sale, a guy in a wide-brimmed hat, he starts walking toward them. You could hear him say, "Hey, hey, hey." You know, that universal sound of someone trying to break up a fight. But he never even got close. Before he could take another step, it happened. The woman, with this sudden, sharp movement, she snatched one of the porcelain plates right out of the box. She raised it high above her head, a gesture that just screamed, "If I can't have it, no one can." It was so dramatic, almost theatrical. And for a split second, I was sure she was going to smash it right there on the ground. But the man, he reacted instantly. He lunged forward, grabbing for the plate, and instead of just taking it, they started to wrestle for it. This wasn't a squabble anymore. It was a physical struggle, a tug of war over a piece of brittle china. The man, with this determined grunt, he used his full body weight and just wrenched the plate away. He spun as he pulled, using his own momentum, and he got it. The plate was free, but that same force sent him off balance. He went tumbling backward and fell, hard. There was this heavy, sickening thud, and as he hit the ground, the plate slipped from his hand, shattering into a dozen pieces. That crisp, final crack of the china was followed by a long, pained groan from the man, a sound that just cut right through the pleasant chatter of the yard sale. And then, just silence. A stunned silence fell over the entire crowd. Everyone knew. We all knew something was horribly, horribly wrong. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. We just stood there, holding our breath, staring at the man lying face down in the grass, not moving. The woman just froze, staring at the man, motionless on the ground. A hush fell over the entire crowd, a thick and heavy silence, broken only by the chirping of birds. And then, something else. A dark, crimson stain began to ooze from beneath him, spreading slowly across the green grass. The sight of it shattered the silence. The woman let out a piercing scream, a raw mix of terror and disbelief. And just like that, people rushed forward. "Don't move him," someone yelled. Another was already on their phone. Somebody call 911, the woman who'd started it all. She was just standing there, hands over her mouth, whispering, "Oh my God, oh my God," over and over. A few people carefully, gently, rolled the man onto his back so they could see, and a collective gasp went through the crowd. A large, jagged shard of the broken plate was sticking right out of his stomach, a gruesome, horrifying punctuation mark. At the end of a petty fight, the woman just collapsed, sobbing. The man just lay there, his breathing short, heavy gasps, his eyes wide with pain and shock, staring up at the empty sky. It was a terrifying moment of shared helplessness. We used tablecloths, t-shirts, anything we could find to try and stop the bleeding, but it felt futile. The paramedics arrived fast, their sirens wailing. The police were right behind them. As they wheeled the man away, the cops started taking statements. I didn't have much to say. I was just there to buy a lawn chair, to find a little piece of a memory, not to witness a tragedy. The woman just sat on the curb, her face buried in her hands, her whole body shaking. I walked home in a daze. The weight of what I had just witnessed, it was just pressing down on me. I couldn't shake the image of the man on the ground, his eyes wide, staring at the sky, with this look of just pure, unfiltered fear. It's a look I'll never forget, a look that spoke of a life ending far too soon, and far too tragically. I couldn't help but think about the woman, either. How her entire world had just been upended in a single terrible instant. The next day, my neighbor confirmed it. The man didn't survive. And of course, the first thing he asked was what everyone wanted to know. Did she push him? And I had to explain it. No. He just fell. He pulled so hard on that plate that when it finally came free, his own momentum sent him backward. The whole thing, it was a tragic comedy of errors. A series of terrible decisions made by two people acting like children. It's easy to place the blame, especially on the woman who started the fight. But I had only heard her voice first. Who knows what he said or did to provoke her? It felt like a moment where two people's childish behavior ended in a horrific and completely unintended loss of life. I learned later that the man's family, they decided not to press charges. They understood. It was an accident, a terrible, unbelievable accident. But the community's judgment was just as harsh as any verdict. People pointed. They whispered. She became the woman who killed that man at the yard sale. They needed a villain, someone to blame for a senseless tragedy. She wasn't run out of town, not officially, but not long after. She just quietly moved away. It's hard to imagine how a simple argument over a piece of porcelain can just shatter lives. One moment, it's a beautiful summer day, and the next, a man is dead. A woman is forced to leave her home, all because of an antique plate. I still think about Liz. To be honest, I think about her every day. She loved gardening. Her yard was always perfect, a vibrant, colorful testament to her passion. I'd wave to her on Saturday mornings while she was out there with her flowers, and she always had this bright, warm smile, the kind of smile that could chase away any morning chill. Our Houston neighborhood was a quiet, unassuming place, a haven where small, pleasant interactions like that were just the norm. And then, everything changed. On January 25th, 2019. That Friday morning was cold. Uncharacteristically cold for Houston, with this biting wind that made you grateful to be inside. I was in the kitchen, making my first cup of coffee, when I heard it. 4 sudden, sharp pops, so loud, they made me jump. At first, I told myself it was just fireworks, some stray celebration. But I knew, deep down, I knew something was profoundly wrong. I went to the window, and I looked out at Liz's driveway, and in that exact instant, I saw a figure running from her yard, a blur of motion as they scrambled into a dark truck. The truck peeled out, tires squealing as it disappeared into the morning haze, leaving behind just an echo of silence. I ran outside, phone in my hand, ready to dial 911. But the sight that met me, it froze the words right in my throat. Liz was on the ground, near her driveway. She wasn't moving. A small table and some boxes from the garage sale she'd been setting up were scattered around her, a perfect picture of innocence, shattered. Soon, neighbors were coming out of their homes, their faces etched with confusion and worry. The paramedics arrived, their sirens wailing. They worked on Liz with this grim, hurried focus. But even from a distance, it was clear things were very, very bad. Later, we got the news. She had passed away at the hospital. Liz was just 29 years old, and a part of me still can't believe that something so awful could happen in our quiet, safe neighborhood. The police arrived quickly, and their presence felt like an invasion of our peaceful street. The details that started to emerge were chilling. Liz had been shot, at close range, by someone who had just walked right up to her. It was a cold, calculated act, happening in the one place she should have felt the most secure. A neighbor's security camera. It had caught a piece of it. The grainy video showed a person getting out of a black Nissan Frontier, walking up to Liz, and then, just seconds later, driving away, leaving behind a trail of grief and unanswered questions. It was over in an instant, a flash of brutality that shattered the illusion of safety we had all taken for granted. Liz and her husband, Sergio, they were the kind of couple everyone adored. They were high school sweethearts, a true storybook romance, married for about 4 years. You just couldn't see one without the other. Their lives were this beautiful celebration of everything they loved together. Star Wars, Harry Potter. They loved going to pop culture conventions, just immersing themselves in that energy. And the garage sale Liz was having that morning, it wasn't just to clear out clutter. It was to help pay for a trip they'd been planning for months. A pilgrimage to Universal Studios to celebrate their 5th anniversary in the wizarding world of Harry Potter. And that was the most crushing part of it all. To think that this small, hopeful dream was the backdrop for such a brutal, senseless act. It made her death not just a tragedy. It was a cruel, senseless end to a life that was just so full of joy and so full of future. After Liz died, the entire neighborhood changed. That vibrant, communal spirit, it was just gone, replaced by this unsettling blanket of sadness and fear. And we were all left grappling with the same agonizing questions. Who could have done this? Was it someone she knew? A personal vendetta that had spilled over into our quiet street? Or was it a random act of violence? A horrifying reminder that none of us were truly safe. The police talked to everyone. They reviewed that security video from every possible angle, but they found nothing. They released the footage of the suspect, of that black Nissan Frontier, hoping someone, anyone, would recognize something. But weeks turned into months, and no one came forward. The case went cold. A chilling silence just settled over the whole investigation, and the guilt, it just clung to me. A heavy, suffocating feeling. I kept replaying that morning in my head, a constant loop of sound and shadow. Could I have done something? Could I have seen more? Remembered a license plate, a face, anything that could have made a difference? That guilt became this unwanted companion. I'd sit for hours, just staring out my window at Liz's house, almost hoping I'd see her again, even though I knew it was impossible. Her empty driveway was a painful, constant reminder, a void where her bright smile used to be. A few months later, Sergio moved out. And how could you blame him? To stay in that house, surrounded by the echoes of the life they had built together. It must have been unbearable. The house was sold. New people moved in, and they're nice people. But for me, it will always be Liz's house. The place where she loved to garden, and the place where a beautiful life was so tragically cut short. Years have passed, and the case remains unsolved. Just a cold file in some detective's office. It's a wound that never truly heals, especially for those of us who knew Liz. Sometimes the local news will run a story on the anniversary, a brief segment to keep her memory alive. A reminder that a family is still waiting for justice. And it makes me so angry, knowing that the person who did this is still out there, walking free, untouched by the consequences of their actions. So, in a small way, I've tried to turn that helplessness into action. I joined a local group that helps with unsolved cases. We hand out flyers with Liz's photo. We try to keep cases like hers in the public eye. It isn't much, but it feels like I'm doing something. Every year, on the anniversary of her death, I leave a bouquet of yellow roses at her driveway. It was her favorite color. Other neighbors do the same. It's our quiet, somber tradition, our way of showing that we haven't forgotten, that her life still matters. Sometimes, at night, I'll look out my window at that house, and I just wonder, is the answer closer than we think? Did someone see something they're too scared to say? Could the killer still be nearby? A familiar face, hiding a dark secret? Not knowing has become an unbearable weight. Liz's death taught me a difficult truth, that life is fragile, that bad things don't always make sense, and that some questions may never be answered. But it also showed me how a community can come together. We look out for each other now, in ways we never did before. I miss Liz. I miss her smile. And I carry her memory with me. And I will keep fighting for her. Someone has to. She deserves it too. The morning air hung thick and humid, a typical Saturday in our quiet, tree-lined suburban neighborhood. The kind of day where the only excitement was a yard sale down the street. A familiar sight, promising dusty treasures and whispered deals. A woman I'd known for years had laid out her life's excess on folding tables, faded furniture, old clothes, all the usual stuff. A small crowd of neighbors milled about, their voices a low hum. And tucked near the curb, a fluffy, yapping terrier was tied to a post. its barks just another part of the familiar soundtrack of the morning. But that morning, a new, unforeseen note was about to disrupt that quiet symphony. A few houses away lived this powerful, mixed-breed dog, a hulking shadow of a creature, one the owner usually kept securely locked up. But the unforeseen happens, and on this day, the back gate had been left unlatched. A simple, critical mistake. He saw his chance, and with a burst of silent, unbridled energy, he was free. At first, it was just pure, joyous freedom. He sniffed at mailboxes, chased shadows, just a dog exploring his world without a leash. But then, he spotted the crowd at the yard sale, and something shifted. His tail, which had been wagging, went stiff. The playful curiosity, it was gone, replaced by a tense, focused stare. And that little terrier's barks, once just background noise, now seemed to pull him forward, fueling a sudden, aggressive charge. He was no longer a dog on an adventure. He was a force. A young boy, no older than 7, saw him coming and dropped his toy car. And then a shrill, terrified scream tore from his throat as he scrambled back to his mother. The dog didn't even notice. He vaulted onto a rickety card table, sending books scattering, and a set of antique glass goblets crashing to the ground. "Get away," the woman yelled, her voice thin with fear. But he ignored her, fixated on a child's forgotten teddy bear, which he tore to shreds with a single, violent shake of his head. The mood had irrevocably shifted from casual browsing to pure, animal-driven terror. The large dog, now fully consumed by its aggression, turned its attention away from the shredded teddy bear and toward the frantic, high-pitched barking of the small terrier. It was an invitation to violence. The big dog barked back, a deep, guttural roar that seemed to shake the very ground, and lunged. The woman screamed, a desperate cry that cut through the fear-filled air. With a speed born of pure adrenaline, she scooped her small dog into her arms, just in the nick of time. The powerful jaws of the larger dog snapped shut on empty air, inches from the terrier's tail. The big dog began to circle her, its low growl a menacing vibration, its eyes locked on the trembling bundle in her arms. The crowd, once a curious gathering, began to scatter in a panicked exodus. And amidst the chaos, a man, a father who had been idly flipping through a box of old records, made the instinctive, fateful decision to intervene. He shouted, a brave but futile command, and stepped between the snarling beast and the terrified woman. In that instant, the dog's focus shifted. The man became the new target. The dog lunged, its teeth sinking deep into his thigh. A sharp, pained cry tore from the man's throat as he stumbled back, his face contorting in agony. He tried to shove the dog away, but its grip was unyielding. He fell to the ground, his struggle becoming more desperate, but the animal's strength was overwhelming. Its ferocity, absolute. Screams now filled the street, a chorus of terror and helplessness. A man from across the street grabbed a folding lawn chair and hurled it at the dog, a clattering missile that had no effect. The dog finally released the man's leg, only to leap onto his chest. The man, a husband and a father, used his arms to shield his face, a last, desperate defense against the snapping jaws. The dog tore at his jacket, its scratches leaving angry red welts on his arms as he yelled, his voice raw with pain. "Help me, please, help me!" The street, once so calm and ordinary, had become a battleground, a scene of shocking violence that no one seemed to have the power to stop. Just as the chaos reached its absolute peak, a new figure entered the scene. The dog's owner, He came sprinting down the street, his face etched with a mix of fear and apology. He yelled, "Stop, stop!" His voice was a desperate command that somehow cut right through the noise, and to the absolute disbelief of everyone watching, the dog did. It just stopped. The animal, which seconds before had been a whirlwind of pure rage, just froze. Its tail dropped as it looked up at its owner. The man, trembling but resolute, snapped a leash onto its collar. And the click. It echoed with this finality, a sound that signaled the end of the terror. His apologies started immediately, a torrent of, "I'm so sorry, I don't know what happened." But his words were just swallowed by the anger and the shock. Someone was already on the phone with 911, another neighbor, their face red with fury, just started screaming at the owner. And within minutes, the sirens, wailing in the distance, getting louder. The ambulance and the police arrived. Paramedics rushed to the injured man, still on the ground, his face pale with shock and pain. They carefully treated his wounds before loading him onto a stretcher. The flashing lights, a stark, surreal punctuation to the scene. Neighbors stood around in hushed groups. The shared trauma, a powerful, unspoken bond. And the yard sale. It was a disaster. Broken glass sparkling on the asphalt. Books scattered everywhere. The remnants of a life, just strewn about like garbage. The street, which had been so alive with violence, slowly grew quiet again. As a bystander who watched the whole thing unfold from my window, I can tell you that the peace that eventually returned to our street, it was a fragile one. This wasn't just a memory. It was a wound. An unforgettable lesson in how quickly the ordinary can shatter, leaving behind a silence far more profound than any noise. A few years back, my life was in the state of tranquil clutter. My garage was overflowing with junk from over the years, old furniture, forgotten books, you name it. So, on a whim, I decided it was time for a purge. A yard sale felt like the perfect solution, a way to declutter and, maybe, make a little money in the process. I spent the weekend getting everything ready, turning my driveway into its own little marketplace. By 10 a.m. on Sunday, the tables were packed, every item a little piece of my history, waiting for a new home. And the morning started out perfectly. Neighbors strolled by, the air filled with friendly chatter. It was just a perfect suburban Sunday. As the morning wore on, the foot traffic grew, and by around 11 or 11:30, my driveway was bustling. But it was right around then that the first crack appeared in the calm of the day. I noticed a man lingering by a table of tools. He picked up a wrench, then a hammer, just turning them over in his hands. He looked totally unassuming, faded gray t-shirt, jeans, a Dodgers cap. But there was something in his gaze that just made me uneasy. His eyes were darting around, not at the tools, but at everything else, as if he were casing the place. I thought maybe he was just looking for the person in charge, so I walked over. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to sound friendly, trying to mask that feeling in my gut. He said he was interested in the tools, asked if I had any more, but his voice was flat, rehearsed, like he was reading lines from a script he'd barely learned. I pointed to a box in the back, and he just nodded slowly and walked away. But his pace was measured, his movements deliberate. And that's when a real chill went right down my spine. By noon, the crowd was gone. Just a trickle of people left. The sun was beating down, and I was exhausted, ready to pack it all in. And that's when I saw him again. The man in the Dodgers cap. He'd been there for almost an hour, and that fact just settled like a stone in my stomach. He was pacing at the edge of my driveway, hands shoved deep in his pockets. He wasn't looking at the tables anymore. He was looking at me. That friendly shopper facade, it was gone, replaced by this raw, unsettling intent. I tried to ignore him, tried to tell myself he was just some oddball, but the hair on the back of my neck was standing straight up. I announced, loudly, "The sale is closing soon," hoping he'd take the hint. But I was keeping one eye on him the whole time. He was a silent shadow, a discordant note in an otherwise peaceful day. When the last person finally left, it was just him. I started packing up. I told him, "Sale's over. I need to get everything inside." He didn't leave. He just stood there, watching me. His presence was this heavy, suffocating weight. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself my anxiety was just getting the better of me. I loaded a few boxes into the garage, keeping an eye on him the whole time. But when I turned back, he was closer. He was standing right in the middle of my driveway now. He looked down at one of the tables and mumbled something about the tools again. But his tone was different. It wasn't a question anymore. It was a statement. I told him they weren't for sale, that the day was done. He nodded, but he didn't move. Instead of leaving, he just reached down and picked up the hammer, turning it over and over in his hands, just like before. And in that moment, my throat went dry. That friendly clutter of the day, it was all gone, replaced by a single object of pure menace. I heard my own voice, barely a whisper. "Put it down. You need to leave." He just stared at me. His face, a blank mask, as if he was deciding something. Something far more sinister than just buying a hammer. I don't know what set him off. Maybe it was the tremor in my voice. Or maybe he had been planning this all along. One second, he was a statue of silent menace. The next, he was moving. And he was fast. My feet scrambled backwards, stumbling over the lip of the driveway. He raised the hammer, and I turned to run, my heart just hammering against my ribs. I barely made it into the garage before he grabbed me, his fingers digging into my arm like talons. I twisted away, yanking free with a surge of adrenaline, only to trip over a box. A forgotten carton of books, of all things. I fell, hard. The world just tilted and blurred. He was a shadow, looming over me, his face twisted in a mask of rage. I scrambled backward on the cold concrete, my hands searching desperately for something, anything, to defend myself with, and my hand closed around something solid, something heavy, something familiar. It was the wrench, from the very box of tools he had been so interested in. Without a second thought, I just swung it, primal instinct taking over. The heavy metal connected with a sickening thud. He stumbled back, a guttural cry of pain escaping his lips as he clutched his shoulder. His face, once placid, was now a portrait of pure shock and fury. I didn't wait to see what he would do next. I scrambled to my feet, my legs burning with terror, and bolted. I ran, not for the front door, but to the side door that led into the house, a forgotten, rarely used entrance that suddenly felt like my only salvation. I slammed it shut behind me, a final, definitive period on the nightmare. I fumbled for the lock, my hands shaking so violently I could barely turn the deadbolt. Then I pressed my back against the door, listening. It was silent for a moment, a quiet that was more terrifying than any noise. And then I heard it, the crunch of footsteps on the gravel, moving away. He was gone. I crept to a nearby window, peeking through the blinds. My heart still lodged in my throat. The driveway was empty. The yard sale tables stood scattered and lifeless, like monuments to the chaos that had just unfolded. The relief, it was a thin, fragile thing. And it shattered the moment the shaking started. My voice was trembling when I called the police, trying to explain what had just happened. To my surprise, and my immense relief, they were there fast. I showed them where it happened. The hammer he'd dropped, the wrench still lying on the garage floor. They took my statement, asking questions I could barely answer, but they never found him. The man who turned a quiet Sunday yard sale into a living nightmare just disappeared. Weeks passed, and the silence of my own home became a new kind of prison. Every car that pulled into the driveway, every knock at the door, my heart would just leap into my throat. Convinced he had come back to finish what he started, I stopped holding yard sales. I never left the garage door open again, not even for a second. My eyes now scanned the faces of strangers with this involuntary, hyper-vigilant caution. And my mind, it's a relentless replay button, that image of his hand tightening around the hammer. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, a shadow, just beyond my sight. The things I hadn't sold that day, they're still in the garage, gathering dust. I can't bring myself to touch them, to even go near the spot where it all happened. It might sound pathetic, but some nights, I still dream about him. I see him standing at the edge of the driveway, his eyes fixed on me, and I wake up in a cold sweat, the invisible scar from that day a constant, throbbing presence. The yard sale was supposed to be a simple way to clear out the clutter. Instead, it left me with an indelible story and a fear that will never truly go away. I don't know if they'll ever catch him, or if he's still out there, looking for his next target. All I know is that I'll never feel truly safe in my own home again. It was a cold weekend morning, one of those rare, quiet ones. The kind where the air hangs crisp and still, carrying the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. I was walking through my neighborhood when I noticed it, a yard sale at this small, weathered house. It wasn't some big, over-the-top event, just a single folding table and a few blankets spread out on the grass. But something about its simplicity just pulled me in. It was like a little island of someone else's memories, and the thought of a forgotten treasure hiding there was just too compelling to resist. And behind the table sat an elderly man. His face was a map of wrinkles, but his eyes held this gentle kindness. And even though he looked tired, he managed a faint smile as I approached. "Looking for anything in particular?" he asked, his voice soft and raspy. I shook my head, my gaze wandering over the items. Old leather-bound books, delicate porcelain figurines, and a box of silverware so tarnished it looked like it had been buried for decades. I picked up an old hardcover book with a faded green cover. The man's quiet voice broke the silence again. He told me the book had stories in it, some of them, supposedly, true. He said he'd never been able to finish it himself, because, in his words, it was too spooky. I chuckled softly. I was just about to ask him how much he wanted for it, when a sound shattered the peaceful morning. The loud rumble of a pickup truck, a big, black, lifted truck, the kind that announces its arrival long before you see it. It screeched to a halt right at the curb, and 4 teenagers climbed out, all swagger and attitude. They moved with this sense of entitlement, as if the entire world was their playground. One of them, a lanky kid with this cruel sneer permanently etched on his face. He just kicks a small garden gnome sitting by the sidewalk. The ceramic figure topples over, its head breaking off with a sickening crunch. The old man's kind smile just vanished, replaced by this look of weary sadness. He quietly asked the teens to move along if they weren't interested in buying anything, his voice a stark contrast to the aggressive energy now polluting the air. But the ringleader, the skinny one with that menacing grin, he picks up one of the delicate porcelain figurines, a ballerina poised on one toe, looking impossibly fragile in his large, callous hand. "How much for this?" he asks, a taunting laugh in his voice. "$5 to $10, the old man replies, his gaze fixed on the figurine. The teen just laughs, this harsh, ugly sound, and then he throws the figurine on the ground. It shatters into 100 pieces, a beautiful, silent cascade of white shards against the green grass. The old man flinches, as if he's the one who's been struck. "Please," he pleads, and his voice cracks with emotion. "Please, don't do that. That one. It belonged to my late wife. Please, have some respect." But the mention of his wife, it was just lost on them. The kid just grins, emboldened by his own cruelty. He steps forward and shoves the old man hard, right in the chest, making him stumble back. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words were just stuck in my throat. It all felt so surreal. A nightmare unfolding in broad daylight, and I just stood there, frozen, gripping that old green book, my heart pounding in my chest. And I'm ashamed to admit it, but in that moment, I was genuinely too scared to intervene. My own fear was this heavy, suffocating blanket, keeping me from doing the right thing, from standing up for a stranger against a tide of pure, senseless cruelty. The old man, he tried to stand his ground. You could see this flicker of defiance in his tired eyes. "I'll call the police," he said, his voice trembling as he reached for the phone in his pocket. He pulled it out, a small, black rectangle that just seemed so fragile in the face of all this aggression. And the skinny kid, he saw his chance. With a single swipe of his hand, he snatched the phone and threw it into the street. It skittered across the asphalt, its screen shattering into a spider web of cracks, and before anyone could react, before a single word could even form in my mind, he punched him. The blow landed with a sickening thud. The old man stumbled, and then he just fell. And that's when the real nightmare began. The rest of the gang, their faces twisted with this vile, ugly glee, they just started kicking him, hitting him while he was on the ground. It was a vicious, cowardly assault. And the rest of us, the silent, frozen bystanders, we just stood there, trapped in this shameful paralysis. All I could do was hold on to that book, a useless shield, and watch as an innocent man was beaten on his own front lawn. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a distant siren. That sound, it was enough to break the spell. The teenagers scattered. They leaped into their truck and peeled away with a screech of tires, vanishing just as quickly as they had appeared. The old man lay motionless on the ground, a dark stain of blood slowly spreading on his shirt. After the police arrived, I finally walked over to him. He was sitting on his porch now, a neighbor holding an ice pack to his swollen, bruised face. I held out the green book, my hands trembling. "Here's your book," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He looked at me, and for a moment, I saw that same gentle kindness in his eyes. And he just said, "Just keep it." That night, I didn't sleep. The yard sale just replayed in my head over and over, like a warped film. I kept seeing the old man's face, not bruised and swollen, but how it was in the beginning, with that kind, tired smile. And then, when I finally did sleep, the dream came. The scene from the yard sale unfolded again. But this time, it was different. The teenagers weren't just breaking things. They were breaking me. Their cruel laughter was aimed at me. Their kicks and punches landed on my body, my face, my spirit. I was the one on the ground. And the old man, he was standing over me, his face free of bruises. His kind smile returned, and he just stood there, not helping, not calling the police, just watching, with that unsettling kindness. I woke up knowing exactly what that dream was. It was a haunting manifestation of my shame, my guilt. It wasn't about the violence I had witnessed. It was about my own inaction, my cowardice. In the dream, that smile on his face wasn't simple kindness. It was knowing, almost forgiving. He knew the real victim wasn't just him. It was me, the one who stood by, paralyzed by fear, a silent accomplice. That dream, it was my punishment. The broken porcelain figurine, the shattered phone, the gnome, in the dream, they were all me. 1,000 pieces of my own humanity, scattered on the grass, while I just watched it happen. That memory and that dream, they became this constant, unsettling companion. A stark reminder of the fragile line between being an observer and being a participant. A reminder of the heavy price of staying silent. It was just another simple Saturday morning ritual, going to some yard sales in the neighborhood. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just following that familiar impulse, seeing what hidden treasures people were ready to let go of. After a few unremarkable stops, I was honestly about to just give up and head home. And that's when I saw it. Tucked away under a folding table was this old, unassuming metal box. It was the kind of box that just looked like it had stories to tell, its surface weathered and worn. I asked the woman running the sale about it. She seemed distracted, told me it belonged to her late uncle, a man whose life, she admitted, was a bit of a mystery to her. She had no idea what was inside, and after a moment's hesitation, she said it was just $5. That low price, it felt like an invitation, a casual dare. I paid her the money, and as I picked it up, I noticed something strange. It was heavy, far heavier than it looked, and as I held it, I could have sworn I felt a faint vibration, a sort of low hum. It was barely there, just this whisper against my fingertips. But it was enough to make my mind race. Was it just a passing jar, a tremor in my own hand? I told myself it was probably my imagination, just a mind eager to find a mystery. But the box was mine now, and I couldn't wait to get home and find out what secrets it held. When I got home, that box was just burning a hole in my curiosity. I carried it to the kitchen counter, its weight a promise of something significant. With a quick flick of the clasp, I opened it, and my breath just caught in my throat. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a small metal ball. It was warm to the touch, and the air around it felt strangely heavy, almost electric. A dull, soft light seemed to be emanating from its surface, which was etched with a symbol I had never seen before. A series of intersecting lines and circles that looked both ancient and futuristic. And beneath the ball were a few brittle, yellowed papers. They were covered in strange equations, intricate diagrams that looked like blueprints for something alien. The numbers and symbols, they were completely foreign to me. Just a chaotic symphony of scientific gibberish. My first thought was just a mixture of awe and confusion. What was this? I was completely out of my depth. So, I did what anyone does these days when faced with an impossible mystery. I turned to the internet. I took a picture of the glowing ball and the strange papers, posted them on a popular online forum, and asked if anyone had any idea what this was. The replies came in fast. Most of them were jokes, of course. It's an alien artifact. You found a movie prop. But then, one comment cut right through the noise, silencing all the humor with a single, chilling sentence. It simply said, "Get rid of it. It's radioactive." My stomach just dropped. All that initial excitement, gone. Replaced by a cold dread that spread right through me. I recoiled from the counter, my heart pounding in my ears. The humming ball no longer felt like a mysterious treasure. It felt like a ticking time bomb. I just stood there, frozen, the reality of the situation sinking in. What was I supposed to do? Call someone? Who do you even call for something like this? Just as my mind was racing, my phone buzzed. A private message. The sender's username was technical, unassuming, and the message was direct. No fluff, no jokes. It read, "Don't touch it anymore. Move it to a safe place, and let me help you." The sender said they worked in nuclear safety, that they'd seen my post and felt they had to reach out. And their calm, authoritative tone, it was exactly what I needed in that moment of pure panic. I followed their instructions to the letter, my hands trembling. I carefully moved the box. I took it to the garage, placed it inside a sturdy plastic container, staying as far away as I possibly could. Every instinct was screaming at me to just run, but their words gave me the sense of controlled urgency. They messaged me again, asking for specifics, and explained that old, warm metal objects could easily be radioactive lab samples or industrial materials. The way they talked, so precise, so confident, I knew. This wasn't a troll. This was a real expert. And then, they told me the next step, the most difficult one. They said, "You need to call the authorities." And those words, they just hit me like a ton of bricks. It confirmed the grim reality of the situation. I was terrified, but I knew they were right. This was no longer a simple yard sale find. This was a matter for professionals. So, I took a deep breath, and I made the call. I was pretty rattled, and they could tell. They transferred me to a state agency, one that deals with hazardous materials. About an hour later, a van pulls up, and a specialized team arrives at my house. They were dressed in these full-on protective suits, like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, carrying all this equipment I didn't even recognize. The air in my garage just crackled with tension as they went to work. One of them pulls out this handheld device and aims it at the box. And then I heard it. That sound. That rapid clicking noise, that just got faster and faster the closer he got. A chilling sound that confirmed my absolute worst fears. "Yep, it's radioactive," one of them said, his voice muffled by the mask. Another one told me I was lucky, really lucky, that even a short exposure could have made me very sick. They carefully packed the ball and the papers into the special lead-lined container, and just like that, the threat was gone. I found out later that the police questioned the woman from the yard sale. Turns out, her uncle had been a chemist, years and years ago, and the radioactive ball, it was likely just a forgotten project, something he'd worked on, and just left behind. The authorities said they'd investigate further, but I never heard another word about it. But that incident, it left a permanent mark on me. For weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about it. How a fun little mystery turned out to be a silent, invisible threat. Something that could have seriously harmed me and my family, and it's made me nervous. Now, whenever I see some interesting old thing for sale, I think twice. That one, $5 purchase, it completely changed my perspective. A sobering lesson on the hidden dangers that can lurk in the most unexpected places.